So Tom, what's the best way to expand a concept? Why do the same thing but from the other foot, of course? Who are the worst military commanders in Westeros? What's their greatest flaw and what's their most redeeming trait? As with the previous video, we're defining a commander on a broad spectrum, leader of a single army or faction leader, battle tactician or grand scale strategist, all are lumped in and all are judged according to their role specifically, not in comparison to someone else's. Lists like this are for fun, not deep analytical military analysis. Play nice with each other in the comments, guys, come on. And finally, before we jump in, books or show? We'll need both. Load up the clips, Tom, it's time to jump in. For the number 5 spot, we've got a joint pick, and it's Tyrion Lannister and Joffrey Baratheon. They may only have one proper battle to their name, but it was the largest battle of the War of the Five Kings, and they were in charge, so I'm bloody counting it, okay? Joffrey, you've seen the show or read the books. The kid is useless at leadership in all regards, let alone military. So let's just move to Tyrion. Tyrion did his best with defending King's Landing, bless him, and no one would envy being in his shoes having to face off against the menace, especially with this cancerous wart by his side interfering and leeching credit for what was supposed to be his job in the first place. But our favourite little Lannister is just not a military guy. He's a book-smart academic and knows a lot about war from a historical and theoretical standpoint. And because of this, let's be fair, he did an admirable, some would even say excellent job at preparing the city's defences. But as anyone who's worked in the scientific field can tell you, there's a massive difference between something working in theory and something actually working when put into practice. An element that's even worse in a situation as fluid and unpredictable as a battle. Tyrion planned his defences as such that in theory they should have been able to hold against Stannis for a few days. Plenty of time for his father to rush to the rescue. However, as Mike Tyson so eloquently puts it, everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face. And what should have bought Tyrion a couple of days at least ended up buying him about half a day at most. And when in Dany's service, again you've seen the show, he doesn't shine, put it that way. Tyrion's greatest flaw as a military commander? Tricks over tactics. Tyrion isn't some grand strategist or tactician. In the one battle he commands, he was relying heavily on 2 shock and awe tactics to carry the day. That being his wildfire trap in the bay, which was a bloody brilliant move, and smashing the attackers with strong sorties as soon as they made it ashore or to the gates. These types of cheap tricks, and they are basically cheap tricks rather than tried and true tactics, are highly effective against an undisciplined army with questionable morale and a cowardly commander. But against just a decent commander with a strong will leading a disciplined army, they are merely inconveniences, and you need more than these tricks to fall back on. And who was Tyrion facing? That's fucking right. Not just a good commander, but arguably the best one left alive in Westeros. The wildfire needed to destroy the entire enemy fleet, along with the army, for it to have been the game changer Tyrion wanted. And as we see in both the books and the show, Stannis, being a competent commander, wasn't foolish enough to throw everything at the city in one wave, and a few ships did escape the blaze. Then there's the sorties/ambushes. They are only effective if the sortie can hit enemy units in force hard enough to overwhelm the attacking wave while suffering few casualties themselves. This can break the morale of the attackers that have to follow. However, against a competent commander who is fully aware they have the numbers advantage, this only works once or twice, or 3 if you're the Hound. But once again, Stannis, being the absolute boss he is, gets his larger army to start hitting the city in vastly different places, spreading the strength of Tyrion's sorties even thinner than they already are due to unavoidable casualties. Now, in fairness, Tyrion was facing the best there is, but the tactics Stannis employs are quite box standard moves most commanders would know to make, showing just how easy his tricks were to overcome. And Tyrion's most redeeming trait? His bravery. Tyrion does not get enough credit for this, with many just applauding his wildfire trick. But Tyrion's courage to stand firm against imminent defeat and the goddamn menace bearing down on him and almost single-handedly holding what remained of the demoralized defenders together and lead the final sortie himself is honestly far more inspiring than his fireworks. And Joffrey's biggest flaw? Naivety. You probably think we'll use Joffrey as a punchline like usual, but for a change we're actually going to give a serious suggestion. Joffrey had a romanticized view of battle and warfare, no doubt due to the stories about his father. No, Tom, the one on his birth certificate. When it came to the realities of war, he didn't actually have a clue, opting for pettiness and sadism as was demonstrated with the Antlermen, and showed his fear and cowardice very quickly, further demoralizing his already demoralized forces. Oh, and let's not forget this little prick tried to have his uncle assassinated in the middle of the battle. You know, the uncle leading the defenses, keeping what was left of their morale together. Petty revenge over long-term thinking. Sums up Joff. And this little bastard's most redeeming quality as a military leader? Again, a serious answer, I know. Though I've got to use the show. But Joffrey was actually ahead of his time with his idea about one standing royal army ready to defend the realm against outside threats. Cersei shot it down with the current feudal system, but as our history shows, not the worst idea for national security. Fair play to you, Dick Hedison Bredus. At number 4, we have Edmure Tully. Now, the show really cranks up the buffoon dial with this guy, much like they do with Mace Tyrell. But unlike Mace, Edmure in the books is still very incompetent. It's just for different reasons. This guy failed to capitalize on killing the Mountain after having the giant bastard on the ropes in both the books and show. Though I'm going to spank Show Robb a little for not telling him the plan. And he played right into Tywin's hands during the Battle of the Forts, and were it not for his own force, House Mallister and House Vance holding firm, it could have been the most costly mistake of Robb's war after the Red Wedding. Which leads perfectly into what is Edmure's greatest flaw. He cares too much for his people. Now, I fucking hate how the show makes him out to be this glory-seeking idiot.
I think King Robb understands we're not going to win this war if he's the only one winning any battles. There's glory enough to go around.
When in reality, Edmure's greatest flaw as a military commander is his compassion. He can't make the hard choices or bear to see his people suffer, and as such, tries to save everyone. This is best exemplified when Tywin's burning of the Riverlands forces the common folk to seek refuge at Riverrun. Edmure lets them in, not realizing this is exactly what Tywin wants. If Tywin had broken through just one line at the Fork, he could have sieged Riverrun and starved them out in a matter of weeks instead of the years it would have taken had the keep only had its garrison. Basically, his castle would have X amount of supplies for X amount of men, not the entire population of the Riverlands. And Edmure's most redeeming quality as a commander? He's not too shabby at battle planning. It's actually Edmure who plans and coordinates the defenses that ultimately holds the fort, and prevents Tywin from leveraging the cruel situation he created at Riverrun with his ruthless tactics. So despite making a monumental mistake, he showed just enough competence where it counted to not have to pay for it. However, even with this, he is certainly no Blackfish. He's a sweet guy, but sweet guys don't win wars.
Please sit.
Our number 3 pick, it's Harry Strickland. Now, I know you probably think this guy is a show-only invention intended to be nothing but a punchline, but he is absolutely in the books, and this display here is absolutely in line with his book counterpart's attitude. I know, quite surprising, isn't it? He's got original D&D creation written all over him, but he's not. His biggest flaw? The enemy is that way, mate. His most redeeming quality? He showed up at least, I suppose. And that concludes our number 3 pick.
No elephants, Your Grace.
That's disappointing.
For number 2, we have Jon Snow. Now, we've got to go with the show for a lot of this, I'm afraid, as this is where we see most of Jon's battle commanding. So don't blame us, don't blame George, blame solely D&D for him making this list. Jon is often held up as a really good military commander for his performance at the wall during the Wildlings' attack. And yeah, after Donal is killed in the books and Alistair wounded in the show, he does an admirable job of commanding the wall's defenses against the Wildlings. But here's why this feat is just a teeny bit overrated. You see, this isn't the Wildlings' actual attack on the wall. It's a probe intended to gauge the wall's defenses and get the Night's Watch to show Mance how formidable the defenses really were. Which they do, which ends up showing Mance how pitiful they are. This is not a knock on Jon's achievement here, by the way, it's still impressive. It's just a reality check. Then we have an actual battle in the Battle of the Bastards, and it's here Jon shows he's not commanding material, leading his army into a kill trap that you can argue he caused. Maybe that was just a bad bit of luck. Let's give Jon the benefit of the doubt. But then the Battle of Winterfell exists, and before that guy jumps in, don't think I can't hear you typing, I can, I have powers. Yes, there were other commanders present, but Jon was the only one with serious experience fighting the White Walkers / others, and therefore should have been the one in charge of the defenses. And if he wasn't, he needed to grow a goddamn spine and a pair and take charge because he was the only one with the knowledge to prepare for this unique type of enemy. It's a poor reflection on Jon, no matter how you slice it. Who the fuck told Jon the best place to put your artillery is in front of the walls of your famously defensible stronghold? Or to use Dothraki shock troops against enemies you can't actually shock or force to break? Or putting your Spartan-inspired eunuch troops, who would be better served defending choke points, in the open field and exposed on the flanks? You know, where a phalanx is famously weak. Good thing the mindless chaotic whites only hit the fronts of units and don't spill into the sides, eh? I bet that's why Grey Worm really wanted to kill Jon, you know. It had nothing to do with Dany's death, that was just an excuse. As a fellow actually good commander, he probably took him to one side in private and said, "Jon of Snow, maybe better if unsullied behind walls. Better to defend. Jon and Queen then burn open field with dragons." And Jon's reply was, "No, in front of the walls. More epic that way." And Grey Worm's weakness, of course, being... well, just watch the Best Commanders video for that, I'm rambling now. And Jon's greatest flaw as a military commander, he fights with his heart instead of his head. You see it a little in other battles, but this is best exemplified in the Battle of the Bastards. Jon fucking lost that battle hard, and it's almost all down to his own inability to follow his carefully thought out plan in favor of giving in to his emotions. An absolutely terrible trait in a battlefield commander. He had less forces and an equipment disadvantage, but he had a chance. He just needed patience and to use the terrain and his pre-dug ditches to prevent encirclement by Ramsay's cavalry and infantry. And how does that battle end? Alright. Jon basically gets a large portion of his troops killed and only wins because Sansa saves the day. Though, in fairness, she could maybe have clued him in a little bit about the Knights of the Vale rocking up. Imagine Stannis in that Rickon situation. "Your Grace, shouldn't we try and save your brother?" I can guarantee you with 100% certainty his response would have been, "Hold the line. My brother's already dead." God, Stannis is so boss. For fuck's sake, George, give us wins. I want the actual, real, proper version of this battle so fucking bad. And Jon's most redeeming trait? He's good at getting people to like him. With the odd few exceptions, Jon for the most part is a pretty charismatic guy, and even gets Stannis I hate everyone connected to Ned Stark to like him, and like the one true king is willing to get stuck in the mud to win people over. He may not be the best strategist or tactician, but he's great at building a camaraderie with his forces, which leads to a strong loyalty which has saved him more than once. Don't take this as us hating Jon, we really like Jon, but he's definitely not his big bro when it comes to military leadership. And we've made it to our number one pick for worst military commander, and it's the one, the only, Randyll Tarly. This sun-abusing douchebag is overrated as hell and needs knocking down a peg or two. However, overrated or not, he's still a bloody good commander and definitely doesn't deserve to be on this list. And we do owe this guy an explanation as to why he didn't make the best commanders list in his own video. Our actual number one pick is of course Balon Greyjoy.
And how do you feel about that?
Strap in, guys, this one is an absolute doozy. A lot of this happens prior to the events of Game of Thrones, but it's just the tip of what makes Balon a real idiot. 5 years after Robert's rebellion, Balon woke up and decided, you know what would be great? Having my own independence. I've already grown my fleet since the end of the rebellion, and hell, we didn't even really get stuck in until near the end, so we should be rather strong. And that Robert fella, he's not that well liked. I might stand a chance here. So what did he do? Balon took his ships, sailed them down to Lannisport, and burned down Tywin Lannister's fleet, starting with his capital ship. That'll teach him. Then he attacked Seagard of the Riverlands and got slapped for it, and Balon lost his first son. But who cares, he's got 2 more. He's still playing with house money here, and surely the other houses will decide that Robert looks rather weak. Right? Nope. Good old Ned Stark comes to the party. Tywin's pissed at Balon, so that's the north plus the west, and good old dutiful Stannis. The Master of Ships commands the Royal Fleet and meets up with the Red Wine Fleet. What's a Red Wine Fleet, Tom? That sounds like something that might have been useful in a previous video. The Riverlands, who are not happy about Seagard being attacked, also decide to chip in. So for those keeping count, that's the Crown, the North, the West, the Reach, and the Riverlands against a couple of puny islands that aren't named Great Britain. Rule Britannia. If anything, Balon's dumbassery effectively united the realm.
Good job.
The absolute arse-kicking given to Balon helped solidify Robert as king, who probably forgave Balon for inconveniencing them because it helped consolidate his rule and cost Balon his 2 eldest sons, with his only remaining son Theon being shipped off to the north as a ward to Eddard Stark. So yeah, that one was bad enough. He's probably learned his lesson for next time he joins a war, and that it's important to have allies. This fucking guy just doesn't learn. When offered the chance to join Robb Stark to help take down Tywin Lannister, he rejects the offer and attacks the North instead.
You serious?
Sure, a little payback is nice, but where does that leave him exactly? The North is too large of a kingdom to hold, and it's not exactly flowing with resources. It did completely ruin Robb's campaign, so 1 point there, but otherwise it doesn't do much for him, and most importantly, he hasn't gained any allies, so eventually his arse is going to get handed back to him. If he had instead accepted Robb's request and attacked Casterly Rock, you devastate the foundation of the Lannister cause and potentially take a huge chunk of their riches. By devastating the Lannisters, Balon would destroy any hope of anyone else becoming king of the Seven Kingdoms, which gives you even greater freedom in future events. He would have also had Robb Stark as an ally, so that's the North, Riverlands, Iron Islands, and potentially the Westerlands on one side. Robb continues his assault and chases Tywin Lannister back to King's Landing or to the west, and the Tyrells who witness things are not going great for the Lannisters either treat with Robb or Stannis or just sit back and watch. This is an absolutely game-changing moment that gives Balon a seat at the table and makes him a big-time player. Once Tywin's wiped out or his seat of power looks rocky, he starts to lose many of his advantages. Casterly Rock not only provides riches but also enhances reputation. Just like Robb losing Winterfell made him look weak, losing Casterly Rock would signal to everyone that Tywin isn't as untouchable as he'd have you believe. No singer is going to get him out of this bind. Even if you take his plan to strike back at the North into account, he's far too bitter, vengeful, and far too committed to the old ways to realize what many suspected to be his plan anyway, which I'm gonna give him credit for was actually pretty sound on paper. It's often speculated the idea was to employ a hammer and anvil approach by taking Moat Cailin, trapping Robb between Moat Cailin and the Lannisters, letting the Lannisters annihilate or pin down Robb while exhausting the lines themselves in the process, and use the fact they were in possession of the key to the North to force the exhausted South into peace talks while they mopped up the remaining northern resistance. But having a good plan alone is not what makes you a good military leader. It's your ability to execute said plan with your resources, which leads us perfectly to what was Balon's greatest flaw? Eyes bigger than his belly. This doesn't take a long-winded breakdown. Balon's campaign ambitions were optimistic to say the least with his meager forces. The Iron Islands are the weakest faction after the Crownlands, but at least the Crownlands are arguably just a bodyguard army for the king or queen. Their naval power is seriously underrated, but when it comes to manpower on the land, the Iron Islands have 20,000 men at a push. And you want to take and hold the largest kingdom with that, Bailey boy? As we said in our best commanders vid, a good commander like Stannis can make a small force work for them, but you need some serious tactical and strategic skill to pull it off, and you need to be incredibly hands-on in managing the logistics of where and when to strike, which Balon is not. Dude basically says, here's the what, you guys figure out the how. And Balon's most redeeming quality? He picks the right moment. Here's the thing, in the show at least, and it's even arguable in the books, Balon was, on a technicality, the winner of the War of the Five Kings. Robb, Joffrey, and Renly were all dead, and Stannis, being the absolute menace he is, has likely set himself back considerably from taking the mainland, let alone its shithole of a neighbor, by opting to be an absolute Chad and actually defend the realm he wants to rule at the Wall. Balon was the only Independence King left who could call himself so without fear of repercussions from the war-weary mainland. This idiot has spent many years stewing, wishing vengeance on the Starks and gaining his nation's independence. But I'll give Balon his credit. He held in his anger, bided his time, and mustered what he could to capitalize on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And it's fair to say he did get a bit of payback on the North and the Starks because of his patience and did some damage. Still, he could have had so much more. And that's our take. Can you think of any commanders worse than these, or will the comment section be one big in defense of Jon discussion? Me and Tom can't wait to find out. Thanks for watching, guys.